The political and social storm in Israel has entered a new phase with what many are calling a total revolt by Israeli citizens against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's move to end military draft exemptions. This moment marks a dramatic turning point in Israeli society, one that blends history, politics, religion, and the very foundation of the country's defense structure. For decades, Israel has had a unique system where ultra-Orthodox Jews, or Haredim, were exempt from compulsory military service. This was originally a small arrangement made in the early years of the state, but over time, it grew into one of the most divisive issues in the nation. Today, that exemption is being directly challenged, and the reaction across the country signals that a long-simmering conflict has now erupted into the open. At the heart of this controversy lies Israel's universal conscription system, which requires most Jewish men and women to serve in the military when they reach adulthood. This service is not just a defense obligation but also considered a cultural rite of passage. For years, secular and religious Israelis who do serve have carried a sense of burden, while the Haredi community largely avoided service under the justification of dedicating their lives to religious study. Netanyahu's move to alter this arrangement was seen as an inevitable collision between two powerful currents: the need to maintain a strong, fully manned military in the face of growing security challenges, and the demand by secular Israelis for fairness and equality in national service obligations. The revolt now spreading in the streets is a reflection of this clash. One of the key features of this crisis is the scale of public mobilization. Protests have erupted across major cities like Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa, with thousands chanting against the government. Banners bearing the words, "Bibi, we won't fight," highlight the defiance, making it clear that many citizens are unwilling to carry the defense burden alone while exemptions remain in place. This slogan has become the design element of the movement, uniting diverse segments of Israeli society, from secular youth to reservists, from liberal activists to families who lost loved ones in service. It is a rare instance where political dissatisfaction has been distilled into a single, powerful message that cuts across demographics. Performance-wise, the government's attempt to push reforms has run into stiff resistance. Netanyahu's coalition depends heavily on ultra-Orthodox parties, which fiercely oppose any change to the exemption policy. These parties argue that forcing Haredi men into military service violates their religious way of life and undermines the core values of their community. On the other hand, secular Israelis, and even many in the security establishment, argue that the growing demographic weight of the Haredim, who now represent a significant portion of young Israelis, makes the old arrangement unsustainable. If a third of the next generation is exempt, the performance capacity of the Israel Defense Forces could be crippled. Thus, what we see now is a tug-of-war between political survival, religious freedom, and national defense readiness. Design elements of the protests themselves are also telling. The streets have been filled with Israeli flags, but rather than symbolizing unity with the state, they are now symbols of reclaiming fairness and equality. Reservists, who form the backbone of Israel's military response in emergencies, have played a unique role. Many of them have publicly announced that they will not report for duty if exemptions remain untouched, effectively holding the government accountable by threatening to weaken the country's defensive readiness. This tactic is unprecedented in Israeli history and speaks to how deep the frustration runs. The use of digital media has further amplified the revolt, with viral videos, live-streamed protests, and online petitions adding pressure to Netanyahu's already fragile coalition. The unique selling point of this entire movement is its potential to redefine the Israeli social contract. The draft exemption debate has lingered for decades, with successive governments kicking the can down the road. But now the revolt shows that the public is no longer willing to accept half measures or postponements. What was once tolerated as a temporary compromise is now seen as an existential flaw. This makes the movement stand out from other protests that Israel has experienced in recent years, such as the demonstrations over judicial reforms. Unlike those, this fight directly involves the military, which is often considered the most unifying institution in Israeli society. If the military becomes divided along religious and secular lines, the implications could reshape Israel's future at its core. Looking deeper into the technical aspects, the Israeli Defense Forces are built on a model of mass participation. While highly advanced in technology and strategy, the IDF's strength comes from the ability to mobilize quickly and field large numbers of trained soldiers. This is only possible because of the universal draft. Without it, Israel's small population cannot sustain its security needs against multiple regional adversaries. By allowing a large segment of society to remain exempt, the system faces inefficiencies. This is why military leaders quietly support changes, but they are wary of clashing openly with the ultra-Orthodox leadership. The revolt exposes the cracks in this delicate balance, as the citizens themselves push where the generals and politicians hesitated. Culturally, this revolt highlights the growing generational gap in Israel. Younger secular Israelis, who are expected to serve 3 years in uniform, followed by years of reserve duty, see no justification for others being exempt purely on religious grounds. They view it as unfair and unsustainable. Meanwhile, ultra-Orthodox leaders insist that religious study is as vital to Israel's survival as military service, framing it as a spiritual defense of the nation. This clash of worldviews makes compromise difficult. The protests, therefore, are not just about policy, but about identity, equality, and the very vision of what Israel is meant to be. Internationally, this revolt sends a complex message. Israel's allies, particularly the United States, are watching closely, as instability within Israeli society can affect military coordination, security planning, and regional deterrence. For adversaries like Iran or Hezbollah, internal dissent could be seen as a weakness to exploit. Yet at the same time, the protests also demonstrate the vibrancy of Israeli democracy, where citizens openly challenge their leaders, even on issues as sensitive as the military. This dual perception makes the movement not just a domestic issue, but also a development with global resonance. From a political performance perspective, Netanyahu is in a bind. His coalition depends on ultra-Orthodox parties for survival, yet the broader Israeli public is rebelling against the very concessions he must uphold to keep his government intact. This places him at the center of a storm where every move risks alienating one side or the other. If he caves to public pressure, his coalition could collapse. If he maintains the exemptions, he risks escalating the revolt to the point of widespread refusal to serve, something Israel has never faced before. The slogan, Bibi, we won a fight, is not just rhetoric. It has a warning that the foundation of Israel as a defense system could fracture if the government doesn't find a workable solution. The uniqueness of this revolt lies in its all-encompassing nature. Unlike protests limited to economic grievances or political reforms, this movement touches the lives of nearly every Israeli family. Almost everyone has a child, sibling, or relative who has served, is serving, or will serve. This gives the revolt a personal dimension that makes it more powerful than most political controversies. It's not abstract. It's immediate, tangible, and deeply emotional. The energy on the streets, the statements by reservists, the widespread use of social media, and the refusal to accept compromises all point to a defining moment in Israeli history. This is not just about military draft exemptions. It is about fairness, equality, and the sustainability of a national model that has worked for decades but now faces its greatest test. The outcome will determine not only the balance between religion and state, but also the resilience of Israeli democracy under pressure.